Most of the suffering people experience in their lives does not come from what is actually happening, but from the thoughts they believe about what is happening, because the human mind has a habit of narrating reality in a way that feels convincing but is rarely accurate, and once you begin to see this clearly, something fundamental shifts in how you relate to your inner world. From a very young age, people are taught to trust their thoughts as if every idea that appears in the mind is true, meaningful, or important, but thoughts are simply mental events that arise automatically, shaped by past experiences, conditioning, fear, memory, and habit, not by wisdom or truth. The mind produces thoughts the same way the heart produces beats or the lungs produce breath, and yet unlike bodily functions, thoughts are often taken personally, as if they define who you are, what you are capable of, and what the future will look like. This is where unnecessary suffering begins, because the moment you believe every thought that arises, you hand control of your emotional state to something that was never designed to lead your life. A thought can say, "You are not good enough," and instantly the body tightens, the mood drops, and behavior changes, not because the thought is true, but because it was believed without question. Another thought can say, "Something is wrong," and suddenly anxiety appears, even when nothing in the present moment is actually dangerous. The mind constantly scans for problems because that is how it evolved, not to make you peaceful or happy, but to keep you alive, and in modern life, this survival mechanism often misfires, creating fear where none is required and tension where ease is possible. Overthinking is not a sign of intelligence, but a sign that the mind is trying to solve problems that do not exist in the present moment, replaying the past or rehearsing the future in endless loops, convincing you that thinking more will bring relief, when in reality it does the opposite. The more you try to think your way out of discomfort, the deeper you sink into it, because the mind cannot resolve the distress it creates, and this is why many people feel trapped inside their own heads, exhausted by constant mental noise, yet unsure how to stop it. The key insight is simple but profound: you are not your thoughts, you are the awareness that notices them, and once this distinction becomes clear, thoughts lose much of their power. Awareness is naturally calm, spacious, and present, while thoughts are fleeting, repetitive, and often contradictory, appearing and disappearing on their own without effort. If you watch your thoughts closely, you will notice that you do not choose most of them, they simply arise, which raises an important question: how can something you did not consciously choose define who you are? The suffering begins when identity is attached to thought, when a mental sentence is treated as a personal truth rather than just another passing event in consciousness. This is why trying to control or eliminate thoughts rarely works, because resistance gives them importance, making them feel more real and urgent. When you fight your mind, you strengthen the belief that the mind is in charge, but when you stop believing everything it says, the struggle naturally softens. Peace does not come from having better thoughts, but from seeing that thoughts do not require belief in the first place. This does not mean you ignore practical thinking or stop using logic when needed, but it does mean recognizing that most thoughts about yourself, others, and the future are interpretations, not facts. The mind loves certainty, so it tells convincing stories, but reality is often much simpler than the mind suggests, and when you stop believing the story, the emotional charge dissolves. Many people spend years trying to fix themselves, believing that something is fundamentally wrong with them, when in truth, the discomfort comes from identifying with thought rather than resting in awareness. Anxiety is not caused by life, but by believing fearful thoughts. Depression is not caused by circumstances alone, but by believing hopeless narratives about those circumstances. Overthinking is not a personality trait, but a habit of believing that mental activity equals control. Once you see this, freedom begins not through effort, but through understanding. Letting go does not require forcing thoughts away, it requires allowing them to pass without engagement, like clouds moving across the sky. The sky does not argue with the clouds, and awareness does not need to argue with thoughts. The more you observe thoughts without attachment, the quieter they become, because they feed on attention and belief. When belief is withdrawn, they lose momentum. This is why moments of peace often appear unexpectedly, not when you solve a problem, but when you stop thinking about it entirely. Silence between thoughts is always available, but it is overlooked because the mind is busy narrating. Happiness, clarity, and presence are not achievements to be earned, but natural states that emerge when mental resistance drops. This understanding changes how you relate to emotions as well, because emotions are often reactions to thoughts, not to reality itself. When a painful emotion arises, it is usually accompanied by a thought that explains or justifies it, and when that thought is believed, the emotion intensifies. When the thought is seen as just a thought, the emotion can move through naturally without becoming a story. This is why acceptance is so powerful, not because it fixes life, but because it removes the extra layer of suffering created by resistance. Life still happens, challenges still arise, but without the constant mental commentary, they are experienced more directly and less dramatically. Many people believe that if they stop thinking, they will become passive or unmotivated, but the opposite is true, because clear action arises more naturally from presence than from mental noise. When the mind is quiet, intuition becomes clearer, decisions become simpler, and effort feels lighter. The need to constantly analyze disappears, replaced by a sense of trust in the flow of experience. This does not mean you stop planning or caring, it means you stop obsessing, and there is a crucial difference between intelligent action and compulsive thinking. One moves life forward, the other drains energy without producing clarity. The mind wants control, but control is an illusion, and much of human suffering comes from trying to manage life mentally instead of responding to it directly. When you stop believing every thought, you begin to notice space around experiences, and in that space, peace naturally arises. This peace is not excitement or pleasure, but a quiet sense of okayness that does not depend on circumstances. It is the peace of being present rather than lost in interpretation. Over time, as belief in thought weakens, old patterns lose their grip, anxiety softens, and the constant need to fix, improve, or escape diminishes. This does not happen overnight, but through gentle noticing, through seeing thoughts for what they are rather than what they claim to be. The mind may still produce fearful or critical thoughts, but they no longer define reality, and when they are not believed, they pass quickly, like echoes without substance. The greatest relief comes from realizing that you do not need to change yourself to be at peace, you only need to stop believing the thoughts that say you are broken. Awareness itself is already whole, calm, and complete, and when attention rests there instead of in mental stories, life feels lighter, simpler, and more manageable. This understanding is not about achieving a permanent state of happiness or eliminating all discomfort, but about changing your relationship with thought so that it no longer dominates your experience. When you see that thinking is optional rather than mandatory, freedom becomes available in ordinary moments, not as a future reward, but as a present reality. The mind will continue to think, because that is what it does, but you do not have to follow it everywhere it goes. You can notice, allow, and return to the present moment again and again, gently, without force, and in doing so, you rediscover a natural ease that was never truly lost, only obscured by belief. The simple truth is that you suffer less when you believe less, and peace is not found by controlling the mind, but by seeing through it, because when you stop believing everything you think, you begin to live from a deeper place of clarity, presence, and freedom that was always available beneath the noise.